Bick returns. On the side of opposition, we have our teachers. Before we start the debate, because we have members of the audiences, I'd just like to remind everyone to switch off their phones and put it on silent. If you feel the need to chat, do it minimally, or better yet, to do it at all. And if you need to leave this room, do it in between speeches and not during speeches. My name is Matt, with me is Pas Putri. And without further ado, I'd like to invite the Prime Minister to start the speech.
Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Now we see today in this world where not all countries are very safe indeed, because there are countries that have this peace and harmony, but also there are countries that are having high organizations that have grown too big, bigger than the government itself. And when these all conventional policies, all these governmental systems and all these police authorities have failed, this is where we must give the arms to these vigilante groups in high crime areas, so that the problem of high crime rates can be settled in the first place. But then we are going to prove our case here that this is only going to be a last resort, because when other means have failed, because they can also be items that can be tackled by the government. But then when the government cannot tackle it as a whole, then this is why here comes the importance of these vigilante groups to help the government itself also. And also these vigilante groups are going to help the government by tackling and eradicating these criminals only when these criminals abuse the lives of are going to fight for the right cause. When we are going to give them these arms, right? When we are going to give this gun ownership, we are going to train them. Whereas this society, which is going to make which is going to establish such a big organization, which is vigilantism, this is where the trainings are required for them to really have the ability and the strength to fight these big organizations, right? Because this is what we are upholding, which is justice. Because justice is not upheld in society, right? So now the problem is status quo is that these criminal organizations are so powerful that authorities cannot handle by themselves, such as in Mexico, where these gangs and drug cartels and these abusers and criminals, they abuse the civilians, right? They threaten to kill them if they don't pay this protection money for them, right? So they force them to pay this protection money. They victims, right? And then because of this is where the crime rates are very insane, and this is why we as side government must impose and implement this establishment of vigilantism, right? Now, clear with my case, I'm going to give you a few substantives about how, when we are going to give this as a last resort, this is a final step for eradicating criminalism. In other words, why is it very necessary as a dire need, and also how effective is our mechanism to fight fraud attacks.
Yes. Just now you said you're going to give training to this last resort, but giving training to this last resort kind of method to fight crime, isn't it the same way as drafting you into the military?
No, it's not the same as military. It's because this, even I've already clarified to you that these conventional policies and these authorities, these government authorities, including the military, have also failed, which means that they don't have the strength. Here I eradicating criminalism, right? Because these authorities are unreliable. Some of these members of the authorities are already compromised by drug cartels and these criminal organizations because they bribe these authorities, so that this is why it's harmful. And also these authorities that are initially the ability to defend and tackle and take down these organizations, right? When with the help of vigilantes and also this the society, the people of the society itself, when they have already been given arms and training, this is where it helps. So, what are the harms when we don't put our mechanism at stake, right? So, life is at stake, right? We are talking about how many lives are abused by civilians, where they kill these people, they don't have that mercy towards these people, they just want to do these crimes, and this is why it's terrible. Life is irreplaceable. About the effectivity, where how we solve the problem in status quo, because when these big organizations have been taken down and these gangs have no longer exist, or when they also exist, this can also be solved by our case. Here is where when these criminal organizations no longer operating, this can lead to the stability of the country as a whole. The crime rates itself will lower down, will decrease, and people will be more safer because they feel safe because they know that these vigilante groups are going to protect them. But then, what if we don't continue with this case, right? Gangs are going to terrorize and kill more civilians. There's going to be a more terrible backlash in the country, and this is what we're going to prevent. But then, why safety is hampered, right? Because when these gangs are killing these people, when we so also on the second level, which is how are we going to uphold justice, right? Where justice is not upheld already in CSGO, where we implement these kinds of justice, is that this society also have the right to defend themselves, right? So also when justice is already upheld, this also eradicates the criminal acts in the first place. When also justice is held, is because when these criminals can no longer act as criminals anymore, when what these acts of terrorism have been done to civilians can be settled anymore, because when our case is not set to fly, the government cannot handle these organizations, and this is why it's unjust. So I've already told you today that this act of giving arms to these vigilante groups in high crime areas, it solved a very big problem in the country, such as in Mexico. Is becoming a worrying factor in the society, right? This is why our case must set to fly. I've already told you, when all governmental policies have failed, this acts as a last resort, and also about vigilantes, which also fights for the right cause, and we are giving them trainings. And the problem is their school, which is about these criminal organizations are getting too haywire and causing turmoil in the country, and also about substantives, where we are going to eradicate criminalism when authorities are unreliable. And we also tell you about the effectivity of this mechanism on how we solve and prevent terrorism. With that, I as Prime Minister and also as side of government would be happy to propose in today's debate.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister, for opening the debate. To present the case on the side of opposition, I'd like to invite the leader of opposition.
Very good evening to the members of the hall and all the spectators, my fellow teammates, the educator, and the fellow government side. Now, today, for this evening's motion, this House would allow armed vigilante groups in high crime areas. Now, our objective on the side of opposition is to prevail justice. Now, ask yourself this question: what if the justification of these vigilante groups are one-sided? When we give them justification rights, what will happen? Anyway, I will get to that in a further point. Now, for the side of opposition side's stance, we would only want law enforcement to bear arms to enforce the law. We do not want vigilante groups that have not been through training and all that. Anyway, I shall get that. But before I begin on my points, I shall start on the rebuttals from side government. Now, just now he said some of these vigilante groups, they don't have the strength. If they don't have the strength, how can they, how do we say, fight and tackle these criminals in these high crime areas? Because these criminals in these high crime areas are actually very, very, very terrible. They have years of experience in murdering people in a merciless way. Now, moving on, if authorities can be bribed, we as the opposition side would also believe that vigilante groups can also be bribed because they are also human. And when it comes to human, please sit down for a moment. Anyway, as I was saying, vigilante groups can be bribed because they're human. Some humans have bad intentions to get into work sometimes. And moving along. They would fight for you for the right cause. That's a question that you have to bear in mind. Also, what the side opposition likes to stress is, how would life be with vigilantes and without vigilantes? Well, with vigilante groups, you would see civilians walking around with handguns. Wouldn't that place more fear in the civilians? Because normally vigilante groups are anonymous. Yes.
Why is that bad when we're instilling fear upon people to not commit crimes? Because these vigilante groups are people who fight for justice.
Now, civilians, most of the time, they do not commit crimes. So why on earth would you want to put fear on the civilians? But, like, what you said was a good point. You would want to instill fear in the criminals. But then again, civilians, when they see this kind of weapons, they tend to fear this, and you will give training. But the point is, enough money is spent in police training and military training. So why would you want to spend more money on vigilante training? Now, moving on to my points. Vigilante groups can sometimes have a very one-sided justification. For an example, in the US, there was a man named George Zimmerman. He was the head of what you call a neighborhood protection sometime last year. And because of his extremely one-sided justification, he shot a black kid dead. He thought that the black kid was a drug dealer or a threat, and which is why that is proof that vigilante groups can also have one-sided justifications. Now, secondly, like I said just now, vigilante groups are not trained to see justice because they have in hectic moments when there is, let's say, two people, one criminal who disguises as a civilian, right? Then the civilian is pointing a gun towards the civilian, the innocent civilian who is dressed up as a crime lord. What would the vigilante do? Without proper training, he wouldn't know how to intercept the condition, and he will probably just shoot the false crime lord dead. Now, moving along, we as a side opposition, we would rather place more trained policemen, especially those with higher ranks, or we would allow military intervention in these high crime areas, because in high crime areas, people may have weapons such as rocket launchers or grenade launchers that can cause havoc in these kind of places, which is why we would want military intervention. We would allow military intervention.
You're agreeing to breach the sovereignty of the country and let other countries to intervene into this situation?
Yes, if the crime, well, anyway, if crime rates get too high, if the policemen, let's say, they would aggravate the crime lords, they would also like to react in return. Maybe the crime lords will start blowing up banks to steal more money so that they can get more arms. And then when they destroy banks, they destroy more things. That's also kind of equal to what military intervention can do. And now, to summarize all my points again. Now, what we want is we want a balance and equal justification for our law enforcement, and we would want only law enforcement to we only want armed law enforcement and not random people who just want to become part of vigilante groups. And also, why is the opposition and with that, I rest my case. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the opposition. To continue the case on side government, let's have Deputy Prime Minister.
Wait, give me a minute. Right. So the opposition hasn't been listening clearly from my Prime Minister's speech, in which they try to question us, what if these people are one-sided in the first place? But thinking logically, these vigilante groups will be one-sided in the first place. The reason why is because they've already started this whole vigilante group idea for a right cause, because they've already been abused by the drug cartels, they've already been abused by the gangsters, and obviously they will fight for the vengeance for the idea that they've already been abused by these certain people. Meaning to say, your assumption that these vigilante groups are one-sided, meaning to say that they're going to act on selfish grounds, wouldn't happen in today's debate at all in the first place. After all, my Prime Minister has already given a huge clarity on how these people actually act, because they want to run their business safely. They want their women in society to be much more protected, because they don't want to be harmed by them from being raped from these drug cartels or even gangsters in the first place. Therefore, your whole assumption already falls. But then, they say that, well, wouldn't it be beginning of my Prime Minister's speech, in which they said they won't, because these people are people who wanted vengeance in the first place, who wanted to uphold what is justice, and therefore they're not similar as policies who have already been compromising with these villains in the first place, right? And therefore, because they're the ones who have already been abused, they wouldn't do such a thing and suddenly become a traitor towards their own civilians who have already been abused as well. But would it make civilians fear? The question that they tossed upon us, right? Well, here's a simple response. It wouldn't happen, because these civilians are also aware that these vigilante groups are people from their own neighborhood who wanted to protect the civilians' protection inside that city in the first place, right? Meaning to say that these civilians wouldn't be afraid, because they're aware of the main purpose of these people holding a gun in public in the first place. Not to shoot the civilians, but to shoot for the criminals who are about to abuse the civilians. On the last question, will military of the country work? Because they say, like, since policies won't work, let's do military, right, Madam Speaker? But here's the thing, right? It wouldn't happen in the first place, even though it's already, meaning to say that the government wouldn't be incentivized to even use this. Why? Because the police inside the citizen, inside that situation itself, has already been corrupted. Meaning to say that even if you want to create a report towards the military in the first place, it has to start from the policies and then following the chain of command. Meaning to say that if the policies are already corrupted and you try to expect this military to suddenly take action, it wouldn't happen, because there wouldn't be anyone reporting. Why? Because these policies are already incentivized not to do so, because even if they try to do, they will be killed by drug cartels, like what's already happening in Mexico, in which when the policies try to report or even try to make a capturing attack, then therefore the next day they will be skinned. But also, these people are also corrupted, in which they receive briberies from people to not even do this kind of reports. Your whole counter proposal, false. So let's move on to the arguments in my today's debate, right? But before that, any one of you. Thank you. So let's move on to the first argument on why is it important for us to deter these crimes in where crimes happen all the time, and criminals are not afraid at all of committing these crimes based on 3 reasons. First one, authorities are unmotivated to do their job because they are afraid to do so, because if they try to act upon it, they can be killed or their families can also be killed. secondly, authorities are truant in this situation as well because they also receive bribery and compromise with these villains as well. Meaning to say that these policies are negligent in carrying out their duty. So what does this mean? It means that criminals are not afraid to do their crimes at all, such as like collecting protection money and also doing rape or even committing human trafficking. But the last reason is because civilians cannot respond back at all, and that's why these crimes happen all the time. Because right now, they stick to the idea of using conventional policies in which they expect the policies to solve the problem, yet the policies wouldn't. Meaning to say that these civilians are left vulnerable to these possible attacks that will be done upon them. And because these criminals are aware of this situation, the criminals are not afraid in order to prevent these crimes. Therefore, these criminals would now become fully aware that any civilian would attack them out of the blue if they see this vigilance in the first place. Meaning to say that these criminals wouldn't even dare to even commit this crime because it's already become a deterring factor. When they've already been aware that government is now allowing the people to become vigilantes and try to therefore, these people wouldn't be afraid to do so because we tell you that this awareness can inform people that they can be attacked at any moment. But for that, yes.
If civilians now have the authority to attack, to kill crime lords, does it mean that crime lords are not going to target civilians themselves?
Well, it's because crime lords are actually abusing people. Why can't people protect themselves back from being attacked from these crime lords in the first place, right? You're not thinking logically here in today's debate. So, why is it very important for us to deter crimes in the first place? Well, because we want to create an emotional closure for these civilians, right? Because these kind of countries in which these people are afraid to go out and practice their rights as normal individuals, especially minorities or people who want to carry out their businesses because they are prone to being abused by the people who wanted protection money. So with vigilante groups, we tell you that it finally gives the confidence for civilians to have better confidence, since we are also deterring these criminals from being attacked upon them, and therefore people are aware of this. They are much more confident to carry out their rights as normal civilians. Business can be done. Women can finally roam around inside the city, and therefore we're upholding the rights of the people to live inside the country, although the government is not doing any shit. So let's move on to the next argument, right? So how is it also a just form of self-defense? Because right now the problem that we're going to face is that the safety of civilians should only be protected by the state. But the problem that exists in status quo is that state has already failed. All conventional policies aren't working. So it means that civilians who are exposed to harms and the possibilities of it to happen is in any situation, and protecting yourself from harm is justified, especially when the government wouldn't protect you because they wouldn't give a damn. So why is it justified, right? Two reasons. It's proportional, because the usage of guns would be legitimate because they are fully aware of the possibilities of harms, of undeniable threats coming from these drug cartels or even gangsters. Because we tell you that self-defense is legitimate if it's proportional, meaning to say that if these drug cartels or gangsters are trying to attack you with a gun, you have the right to self-defend yourself by using a gun as well, Madam Chair. Therefore, these vigilante groups have a right form of self-defense. But second reason is also because it's that affirmative preempt attack. We're talking about situations where these vigilante groups want to attack these drug cartels first, meaning to say they want to attack first before they could attack them. But this is legitimate because they are aware these drug cartels will at one point going to abuse them and also the members inside the country. And therefore, for the right of self-defense, for preventing themselves to be abused first, they have the right to legitimate, is justified by the law because the government wouldn't do anything. And what is your solution to solve the problem? Unanswered.
Thank you very much, Deputy Prime Minister. In this case, on side of opposition, let's have the key leader of opposition.
Very good evening to members of the floor and fellow spectators. On today's debate on this House will allow vigilantes groups propose on this notion. And before I begin my speech, I'd like to point out a few weaknesses and a few rebuttals coming from side government. Where onto the first rebuttal, where the mechanism itself, where they stated that they are going to train these civilians to become vigilantes in the worst case scenario. But we see this as the same as drafting soldiers during wars, because whenever there aren't enough law enforcers to enforce these laws, we see that what the government should do is instead to accept these volunteers who want to fight the law, but at the same time ensuring that they have proper training, they are properly registered, not only giving training to them, that they are registered to enforce laws and teach them on how laws should be executed. And on to the second battle on why if you want to point out that the law enforcers are so corrupted, the step taken should not be recruiting or should not be allowing vigilantes, but instead what they should actually do is to create an anti-corruption agency. When creating anti-corruption agencies, we take away these police officers who are corrupt and instead replace them with honest people. These police officers are now criminals themselves. And the next rebuttal is where the Prime Minister stated that the life of a civilian is irreplaceable. But at the same time, a vigilante is also life itself is also a civilian. And when he himself goes into chooses to be in a dangerous situation, what happens then? We see that this vigilante, because he has considered to be in such a dangerous situation, will not get into his own hands. Whereas police officers, or when they actually become police officers, they will still get insurance backing. And finally, on how the deputy leader of opposition stated, just because at one point they will be attacked, that they can themselves carry out, that they themselves can also attack other people. But we see this. But the problem with this statement is that when you attack someone with the pre-notion of the person attacking you at future times, what happens is that you yourself are actually becoming a crime, that you are accusing, that you, just because of your belief that this person is attacking you, you can attack him back without any proper methods. Yes?
Since the job of the drug cartels and also gangsters is to abuse civilians, would you think the people have the right to preempt that attack?
People have the right to preempt that when they are abused at the time, at the moment, not to go out and attack them and not take the law into their hands and attack. This is such a problem that we see this as the room for abuse. And first of all, the problem with abuse is where the abuse of guns. The government has already given guns to civilians for them to protect themselves. Yes, the government allows guns for self-protection, but that doesn't mean the government allows guns for it to go out and attack other people. In the end, attacking other people is still wrong, no matter if they are criminals or they are innocents. Because when criminals, when they have not committed direct crime at you, it is you who is actually attacking them. Even police officers, when they are faced in a situation, they cannot just go up to a criminal and shoot them just because they know it's wrong. So they have to, it's either they get orders to shoot on sight, or they are in a situation where they have to choose between life and death. And that death, where it's either shoot or be killed. Yes.
So, are you trying to say in this situation where harms are actively being practiced inside society, are you now agreeing with the idea that these people should be left harmed?
No, we do not believe that these people should be left harmed. They can take necessary measures to protect themselves, but not to a point where they attack people, attack these criminals, and take the law into their own hands. And the second reason why we should not have vigilantes is when vigilantes who decide to take law into their own hand, they are civilians themselves. They do not have a proper uniform. And when these drug cartels they see that civilians are now attacking them. What happens next? We see that civilians are now a major threat to these drug cartels, and what they would do is, in the end, they would kill civilians. They would kill any people on site because they believe that just because a civilian can kill me, then I should take necessary measures to kill myself. It defeats is now the war between drug cartels and the civilians themselves. You're actually harming society more than you're actually protecting them. And another point is on when they say that they're going to allow these people to take measures to protect themselves. What will happen then? We see that they would use illegal methods in order to carry out justice. What they would then do is we believe that they would attack family members, innocents of close relatives of these drug cartels who are innocent, and in the end they themselves are harming another side of society just because they are related. And my third point is how when the vigilantes have become so in power, we see that they themselves are going to overtake the police. What happens when people lose trust in the police? They believe that the police can no longer function, and what they will do is that supporting an unruly person, a person who takes the law into his own hands without measures of taking care of the rest. So, in order to wrap up today's debate, what I'm saying is that when you allow armed vigilantes, you are defeating the purpose of creating a safer society. You're allowing a lot of room for abuse, especially in rights of power, and finally you're causing the overtaking of police power themselves. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The leader of opposition close the case inside of government. Let's have that
So what I could conclude from RMC coming over here was most of their arguments were contingent and heavily reliant on the fact of telling us how our vigilante groups will be ineffective and adequate at solving this problem, which is why this is my first issue. Will these vigilante groups be adequate at solving the problems under status quo? Whereby side opposition has stated that because the police can also be corrupt, therefore these vigilante groups can also be corrupt and can also betray among their peers and the civilians under status quo. We tell you that this is not even, we tell you that this won't even happen in the first place. Why? Because we already told you how this is going to be much more effective at solving the problems, much more better than the policemen and the military in this case under status quo. How? Because for the fact that they even have the bravery to even join in the first place, because initially these civilians were targeted on a very minimum level just because they haven't taken any active measures to go against these crime lords in the first place. But for the fact that they opted to go out of their houses and wanted to go and form a group to even attack these crime lords in the first place, is assured that they are actually capable and brave at actually facing these crime lords in the first place. This is how we think that they can be a much more effective attacking force rather than the police, which has proven itself to be time and time again to fail under status quo. But also, we tell you that the idea of corruption is also very assumptuous in this case. How? Because if they already had bad intentions, then they would already be criminals and drug lords already. We tell you that people joining these anti-groups are good and can be trusted in a certain sense. Because for the fact that they even wanted to join in the first place means that they were willing to take this risk, willing to risk their own life safety for the safety of civilians and everybody else. This is how you can guarantee their cooperation, Madam Chair. But also, how are we going to prove that they can be trainings which are going to happen within these vigilante groups that are going to teach you how to effectively combat crime. Whereby we think that because these vigilante groups have also this certain information that about the whereabouts or about how you can handle a weapon much more better, this is how they can effectively still combat these crimes much more better than the police and initial conventional policies under status quo. But also, onto my final rebuttal, is that because we think that by creating these vigilante groups, it's actually creating a deterrence. This deterrence will actually push criminals, will actually push these vigilante groups much more far away from corruption. How? Because the knowledge that the knowledge that they are part of this vigilante organization in the first place. So, if this certain vigilante wants to be selfish in own terms, then he knows that he also can be taken down just like another criminal. We tell you that other vigilantes can take matters into their own hands if one of these certain vigilantes, meaning to say that if somebody were to do something wrong or go against the main principles of this vigilante group in the first place, then they will be taken down also and be treated also like a criminal. Therefore, because they have much more better regulation, much more better supervision within their own members within the vigilante community, and that this is how they can detect problems or corruption within the vigilante group itself. So firstly, we told you why this is very unlikely in the first place, as they join consensually and have made a good show of good faith by opting out of the safety of their houses. But also, even if this happens, we also have this safety net, how this creates a deterrence in the first place. But even if this happens, these vigilante groups can also take down members who have gone corrupt. This is how we think that, yes, we think the vigilante groups will be adequate at solving the problem under status quo. Even if it's not that effective to a certain extent, Mamcha, we tell you it's still much more better than status quo. But which is leading me to my second issue. Will enforcement of conventional policy, enforcing the law of police and stuff like that, right? We tell you that this just is too assumptuous, Mamcha. We told you, and authorities have already proven time and time again to be much more afraid for the fact that these criminals have garnered a huge influence within this certain setting of society, where they are powerful to this certain extent that they can make these polices not only corrupt but scared of them because of their dominating influence, have instilled fear into these authorities. So because of this, they have already instilled fear. We don't think that enforcement at any level will still help their case, as they're already scared, and it's already in their nature to know that if they do anything that take affirmative action against these criminals, then they will be shot just right back. But also onto the second characteristic of these police in the conventional policy, which is that they are compromising. Meaning to say that because they are corrupt and dirty, and because the criminals already have this huge influence, they also have shares within these drug deals and get money already given in to these criminals to this certain extent, especially in the context of Mexico, whereby the government and its authoritative bodies have already proven to already fail, and therefore we don't think that any form of just enforcing this enforcement body is going to work, as they have already failed and failed beyond belief. But also, they wanted to talk about military intervention. We tell you that this is still also assumptuous, because this is contingent on the fact that the police are very good and will submit a full report to call the military to come and even help them in the first place, as we characterize these polices are very bad and they will not communicate with the military in the first place. This is how we don't think that any enforcement of conventional policies will work. This is how our model is the best model to go to solve these problems. But also onto the third and final issue. Are self-defense acts justified in this certain sense? Side opposition has told you no, but also we tell you, first response is that there's the aspect of urgency and time sensitivity in this certain sense, whereby they are it's a certain drug lord and that he can shoot them at will and he threatens them all the time because it's already a high crime area. But also, secondly, because we think that the self-defense we're upholding under our case is a legitimate preemptive attack. Why? Because since crime is already high in the first place, then we follow the nature of self-defense in status quo, whereby if it's that obvious that somebody is going to attack you, then we tell you it's justified to attack him back. The same way that it's justified that these drug lords are already carrying out illegal activities and already threatening to kill the safety of all these people under status quo, then it's also justified for you to take self-defense acts and preemptive measures to actually attack this guy in the first place. because these civilians within these vigilante groups already have the knowledge and know that these people are the drug lords, these people are the criminals, something that the police don't want to act upon but have the knowledge to, then because these people are already brave and effective at doing this, this is how they can use these self-defense methods to actually attack the criminals much more better. This is from under status quo. RMC has to answer a lot of questions, but coming from third opposition over there, even if he does answer it, it'll be way too late.
Thank you, Governor Whip. But before I invite the opposition whip, can I please remind members of the audiences to not exit this room if you have, for any reason, they need to exit this room. Do it in between speeches and not during speeches. It's very disrespectful. Without further ado, I'd like to invite the opposition whip.
A very good evening to all the members of the floor. So today, a motion is this House will allow armed vigilant groups in high crime areas. So basically, what we know about vigilante groups. So basically, they do not uphold the justice. They're actually known by the people, known by the court system, but they are upholding justice just as they know it. So our stance today as the side opposition is only law enforcers can only enforce the law by arms. So even if you want to allow vigilante groups to actually uphold justice, but do not arm them, because by arming them, you're actually making it less safer for the civilians involved in the area. So our objective today is to prevail justice, and we increase law enforcers that already has been recognized by the government, instead of what they are implementing, that we actually place vigilante groups. We increase law enforcers. It also does the same function where it also fight crimes. Maybe before this, the current law enforcers are not enough, not adequate to fight back all the strong crime lords that are sitting and taking over the place. So we will increase law enforcers so that they can fight back. So one POI has been given by the uphold justice. So first of all, we don't know their cause for certain. So basically, if a law enforcers want to uphold the justice, we will know that the law enforcers has been recognized by the government. So basically, they are upholding the justice based on the order from the governments. So sit down, please. Or maybe, or what the civilians might think, or is it just a way for the civilians in the vigilante group to revenge bigger mafias? So through the government, they actually get help from the government, where they can actually get their own benefits by revenging to the mafias. So they are taking laws into their own hands, where laws and justice are being steered in their way through their emotions, not in a clear state of mind. So if they really want to uphold justice, why didn't they actually join law enforcement units? So before that,
why would they citizens who are abused by this drug cartels?
I will go on that further on. So before that, I would like to talk about safety in our cases. So they said that the government side actually said that people does not feel safe because of crime rate of increasing, and the law enforcers are doing nothing. So they will actually place vigilante group so that the crime rate decreases and people will actually feel safer. In our side opposition, we are saying that the crime lord does not actually target the civilian anymore. So before this, they were targeting the law enforcers, because those law enforcers are the one that are actually combating with the objectives of the crime lords. So now these are the civilians combating against the crime lords. So now what happens is the crime lords turn their target into the whole civilian, where they actually place more danger on the civilian, because they might attack civilian and they might show signs that they would be very bad if the civilians even tried to be affected just because the existence of vigilante group itself. So second thing, we would like to talk about justice. So justice, on-site government, they have been saying that we will give training to them, and because the authorities are unreliable, that's why we are going to give training to them. They won't act on selfish ground. but they also stated that they actually wanted vengeance. So basically, crimes also happen because of vengeance. We should not exclude revenge in crimes. Crimes also happen in vengeance. Murder between siblings perhaps would happen because of revenge. So revenge is also a cause that also leads to crime itself. So basically, they are supporting that revenge is good because they actually are firm in their cause. But we should sit down, please. So the current perception of the people involved in the vigilante group of perception of justice will not steer away by emotions. So if we give vigilante groups to actually take action of this crime laws, how is it going to make a difference between a criminal and vigilante group? So the criminal actually take justice by his own hand. He actually thinks that this guy is actually opposing everything that he thinks about justice, and then he's killing himself, killing the person because he thinks so. So the same thing goes to vigilante group, because vigilante group is, they do take laws into their own hands, so they do kill by their own wills. So basically they are neglecting law enforcers, where law enforcers can do their duties if they allow them to increase their forces. Sit down, please. Okay, policy that is okay as long as you have a motive, as long as you have a reason to kill someone, it's okay to kill someone. That's what they are trying to say. And vigilante group are also being criminals if they actually cause the attack first. So we do agree to the right of the accused, but who does in this case, who actually does justify who is criminal? If the vigilante group actually attacks the criminal first, aren't they the criminals? Shouldn't we actually protect the criminals because they are being attacked first? So they can attack them because they are sure about the crime doers will still attack them no matter what. So that's what has been given by side government. They have been trying to say that if you have a reason, just attack them. And so what they are trying to implement is, this thing is never going to end. It will always continue to attack in the middle of the war. They will actually suffer, and justice is not prevailed. So they also say that vigilante can actually kill themselves if they find out that among them there's someone corrupted. So how's that? There's not even justice between the vigilante itself. So how do you expect them to be representative for justice to prevail? So before that, I would like to reaffirm my stance, which is only law enforcers can actually enforce the law by arms. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Opposition Whip. To end the debate for the side of opposition, let's have the opposition reply.
Very good evening to member of floor. Once again up here. Coming from side government, they believe that just by having a vigilante force fighting against crimes, especially in high crime areas such as Mexico, that they can deter all crimes from occurring just because people feel that that crime lords feel that people are now going up against them. But what the problem with this is that they are neglected the fact that there still exists the police force. We cannot simply accuse the police of being 100% corrupt. They believe that all policemen are corrupt, and the only way to actually solve this problem is by taking the law into their own hands. But we say no, not all policemen are corrupt. There are still police officers who still are against crimes. But we believe that instead of just only arming vigilantes, we from the opposition believe that there are police which the police have. And so what side opposition has already offered as an alternative in cases of corruption in police is by, first of all, creating an anti-corruption agency to actually criminalize these police officers who inhibit the actions of law being taken, and secondly, by allowing military interventions. Military interventions does not happen only when police officers ask for help. When the government sees that the problem has been so bad, the military themselves, the government themselves will take action by sending the military in. The police will not. The police still have this. Police will still be able to get the backup, but at the same, but will not necessarily have to ask for the help. They will get help no matter if the government sees as fit by the situation of the. Is that side government are willing to risk the lives of civilians without just because they believe in vengeance. The problem that when side government is so focused on believes that vigilantes are so focused on taking revenge against another group, we believe that they will act. We from side opposition believe that they will act irrationally. They will take drastic measures which are also illegal in a sense. They do what side government would then do is that they will allow people to actually commit illegal crimes just because it stops crimes at the same time. But that's not equal. We believe that causes a certain level of disappropriative. And with that, we believe that side government has won today's debate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. To reply. To end today's debate, let's have
because we're all hungry, right? Let's end this quick yet understandable. Their whole counter proposal over there about creating anti-agency policies and also trying to reinstate the military or even enforce the law is also mutually exclusive under our side as well. But the problem here is that by actually doing this kind of process, it's quite impossible for us to do so because we've already provided you the evidences that it's quite impossible to achieve that kind of thing. And therefore, in that kind of process, we should actually uphold vigilante justice to actually solve the problem during that kind of time. Because since the country is already failing in conventional policies, the country wouldn't take affirmative actions in solving this problem. And therefore, to protect the lives of civilians, we must uphold vigilante justice. So let's move into the issues in today's debate on who protects society better, which is runs to who are the issues. Will military? The problem here is that even though, yes, this military are much more trained and therefore much more effective by using normal civilians to become vigilantes, we tell you that there's a problem where this wouldn't actually happen in the first place because the authorities are not incentivized based on two reasons. Policies, they're afraid, they would be threatened to be killed, but also thirdly, there's also corruption inside the government itself because there are conspiratical authorities at the same place, in which it's already been proven that certain officials inside Mexico are also conspiratical with the drug cartels that exist inside that. Therefore, trying to actually enforce this kind of law wouldn't even exist because they also want to protect their interests that exist in these drug cartels as well because they are corrupted in the first place. Meaning to say that your whole idea on anti-corruption agency or even using military also sounds like a good idea, it wouldn't happen. But if you wanted so much anti-corruption agency, we also have that under vigilante justice, in which we try to prevent corruption by using the people who become the vigilantes in trying to prevent crimes to say that it's a bad thing and try to prevent that thing from happening in the first place. Your argument taken by ours. So let's move on to the second issue. Will vigilante groups be effective? Coming from side opposition, they say that there's a problem where these people are one-sided, right? But here's the thing. These people are normal people as well. They are rational, meaning to say that they fight for a just cause because they are fighting for people who have already been abused and they wanted to fight for this cause. But secondly, they're also deterred from doing this because there are already examples of other vigilante groups who abuses this power, such as like the Al-Qaeda, who is now hunted by international communities. By wearing these kind of things towards this possible vigilante groups that to even abuse these kind of powers because they don't want to end up in the same fate as Al-Qaeda as well. But secondly, we tell you they're also deterred by their own vigilante group members in the first place. If they try to make a selfish act, then therefore they will be punished by the vigilante members themselves because there are people who are still acting for justice, trying to uphold it. Then therefore your whole assumption on these people trying to actually have already been, the members of the families have already been abused, their business have already been abused, why suddenly they want to create much more abuse? It's illogical, right? So therefore, let's move on to the next issue. Is it justified? Totally. We say it's for self-defense. But then they try to say that, oh, doesn't mean that when a person wants to attack you, you have to actually wait for him to attack you first. Well, that happens in one-to-one combat situation in the first place, side opposition. We're talking about drug cartels who uses guns, who would rape you, who would abuse you, and who would kill you for their own interest in the first place. Meaning to say that your life is jeopardized, and because there's a problem of time sensitivity, self-defense is justified under this situation. Meaning to say at the end of the day, our proposal is still going to be justified if it's something really serious, not about a kid punching another kid. Alright? So who protects society better at the end of the day? We do. We create much more better deterrence. We're also getting people who are much more effective to solve this problem because we also have our own training. And therefore, you guys, you're trying to stick with status quo, which is ineffective / useless. Therefore, we take today's debate because we solve the problem better.
Thank you very much for the last speaker. I'd like both teams for the excellent debate. You guys can cross the floor, shake hands, and I'd like to invite both of the members of the audience to join the barbecue that's happening at the cafe. Results will be announced there.
Wait, hey.